Welcome to the PantheonPlus Rewind.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to episode 105 of the PantheonPlus Rewind, the weekly podcast dedicated to the upcoming MMORPG Pantheon: Rise of the Fallen and its devoted community. This week, we get to talk about the recent developer stream that's turning into more of a river, where the floodgates of gameplay are finally starting to open. Then, catch up a little bit on community content. And lastly, we continue to follow the enigmatic ways of Janice Sova. So grab your gi and bow staff with me, Desrin, and my focused co-host, Theric. It's time to train ourselves in the ways of Terminus. Thank you for attending this week's Rewind. Okay, Theric, I don't want to immediately get off topic here because obviously we've got a massive show today. But have you been keeping up with any of the Summer Game Fest stuff?
No, unfortunately I haven't. I saw it and I saw that it was happening and I actually went to check it out and then I got distracted with something else. So no, I haven't seen anything from it.
Oh, man. Well, it's been an unexpected treat, I would say. I don't watch all of the segments because, it goes on for like a week. And in fact, the Xbox and Bethesda showcase is going to be happening like probably during our premiere on Sunday.
So you might be a little distracted, will you be?
I'm going to put it off, actually. I think the premiere is more important to me. Oh, man.
Wow.
But I will say there are some things that are really interesting to me from the showcase, and I am getting pulled into the indie side of things, man. I know that's probably like no surprise to like anyone.
Making a podcast about an indie MMO. So yeah, I think you might be into it.
But really, like it's the creativity that comes from some of these things that is just amazing. And in case you don't know, Summer Game Fest, one really cool thing about this event is they put AAA games next to indie games like they're no different. It's actually really refreshing.
Yeah.
And there were some really, really good ones. And I specifically love the Devolver showcase, which Devolver Digital is a publisher of mostly indie games, and they're always very entertaining.
Yeah, I saw that you responded to one of their tweets, I think, just saying how impressed you were with it. They're a great company. Whenever I play a game published by Devolver Digital, it's always like, you're going to get a good experience.
Yep, and it's going to be unique. It's going to be interesting, and oftentimes they support like indie, like single devs, right? There's some. One of the ones that surprised me was this one called Skate Story, which has like the most beautiful art style, and it's basically a one guy project, and they're supporting him. They do this all the time, but just everything that I'm seeing is like, so there are a few things that I wanted to specifically say, but I'm not going to because this intro would be way too long. But all that to say, like, there's so much, like, I'm kind of done with AAA, man. Like, there's so.
Hey, do they publish MMOs? I mean, that's the relevant question here. I mean, that's what we should be asking ourselves.
They might have a bit of a different vibe than maybe Pantheon is going for, but they are awesome, and I just love that everything they have is like so fresh and so unique, and it's great, man. But
I love finding a company that makes you that resonates those vibes and makes you realize that there's still good publishers out there, good big gaming companies out there, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, you know what else is super fresh and super unique and new?
I have a guess, but I'm gonna wait for you to tell me.
I think it is our adventuring party.
I should have guessed that. I had a feeling.
Well, let's get to it. So we've got Ziplocs on the Darkmoor Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard, Screech on the Scar Bard, Wiki Woo on the Human Enchanter, Shuriken on the Dwarf Cleric, Horsosaurus on the Human Warrior, Daimlos on the Darkmoor Cleric, Jason on the Scar Beard Lord, and we got two new people. We got Anton on the Darkmoor Summoner. Yeah. Perfect. And
welcome, Anton.
And Graham on the Scar Shaman.
Scar Shaman. I love it. Yeah, we had two new members join the party last week during the premiere, and awesome additions. They both were in chat and said, "Hey, been listening to the show a long time and really enjoy it." So happy to have you guys on board.
That's awesome. And now we have 3 Scar in the party. They're definitely reaping the benefits of that movement bonus,
Yeah,
right?
the run buff, man. We're speedy now.
Which
We're
is
speedy.
very important now, as we might get into.
But yeah, I knew you were going to go there.
Anyway, gotta say it again. Just thanks so much for supporting us and letting us do all sorts of really cool stuff with this platform. You guys are real MVPs. And of course, if you'd like to join the adventuring party, feel free to drop a super chat donation during the premiere on YouTube. Or if you can't make the premiere, feel free to check out our Patreon for that kind of more permanent role in the party. And I think that was quite an intro.
Yes, that was amazing. That was great.
Let's get to the meat and potatoes, or
meat and potatoes. Let's get the show on the road. All those sayings,
Yeah.
whatever, just all at once.
Let's get to it.
This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. Okay, off we go into the June development update, which VR gave us on Thursday, June 9th. And they showcased some monk combat and gameplay. We got to see an updated race and class matrix. And they even answered a few questions from the community during the stream. So it was a good time. It featured Ronak and Minus, and Tehom joined them this time, which is awesome. And they did like a intro part, and then there was like a pre-recorded play session with Minus and Tehom were out roaming around and sort of in what looked like an area that we saw on the last couple updates outside Throne Fast called the Forlin. We got a really good look at, I think, the early experience, what it's going to feel like to play a monk in particular as a solo player, and then even as a duo later on, because some of the shots it showed, Minus and Tehom working together in some of the combat situations. And Tehom was on the Enchanter, Minus was on the monk. Now, they've talked a lot lately about how they're shaping the new player experience, and I thought this was a pretty good showcase for that. So let's dig into what exactly we saw, because there was lots of details here that they talked about some of it you just had to observe. To me, the big ticket item here to me was the interplay between class skills and techniques. So Des, like we've said in the last week or two, it's getting harder and harder to discuss them without seeing them in action. And we saw Minus using some techniques here, which was pretty cool. The one that they showed was called Resonating Impact. And Tehom said it was a universal technique. And what that means is that it's not specific to the monk, and it actually works with any weapon. The way it works, what it actually does is it's like just basically a health, like a life tap kind of thing, where it returns some damage, returns some of the damage done as health back to the monk. That in this case, that's what Minus was playing. Now, it's pretty interesting because, since they introduced techniques, we didn't, my understanding of it at least was that they were tied to specific weapons. And this term universal technique is something that I don't think we'd heard before. The way that they described it was that Tehom said it that, I'm just looking for in my notes here where he actually talked about how it works, but it's one that is applicable to any weapon. Mm-hmm. So it's not specific to the class or any weapon in particular, which is kind of seems like a different way of doing it from what we've been described previously, because even the term technique just implies something very specific. And to be honest, I'm having a hard time connecting how these, if there are universal techniques, how do they feed into, class and item and combat identity in any real kind of way? I'm guessing, they're maybe just low level ones. I don't really know. Or maybe it's just being used to introduce the concept of techniques to players. But then again, if they're universal, if they're just across all weapons, is it a technique or is it something else, and I don't know. So I guess the definition is getting a little blurry to me on this one. Did you have any thoughts on what they said about these like universal techniques, Des?
Well, actually, I'm pretty sure this was mentioned in the past that they have, class specific, weapon specific, and a few just kind of across the board. So I guess I was kind of actually expecting to have a spread like this, but I do think it's really interesting that we're seeing this spread, like basically not the first time we've seen techniques, period, but in context, like we're seeing them used, but we're seeing them spread across, being universal in the sense of they're for any weapon. That also doesn't mean they're universal in the sense that they're for every class as well. So keep that in mind. I'm sure there is crossover there because it looks like they're really touching on every zone that this could be, which I actually like. Like, obviously, we don't want every class, every weapon to have the same abilities. Like, that's dumb.
Yeah. When I hear universal, that's what I hear, right? I hear this broad, application of a mechanic that they've come up with being applied broadly. And I don't know if I like that.
Right. And I think in this specific case, it might just be a low level technique, right? Because the nature of the ability is so universally needed for melee classes, isn't it? You get a little bit of health back in exchange for, spending your readiness. And whether that is for any class or just any weapon for the monk, I'm not sure if that was exactly clear. But I think it's great because the techniques aren't like the ESO thing where it's like, hey, it's just a weapon and then you have abilities for that weapon, or like, the Guild Wars equivalent. It's its own thing. This is a new thing. It's abilities that can be all of those things. It could be a universal completely. It could be class, universal, or it could be weapon specific, or it could be weapon and class specific. It could be any of these things.
How they designate these things is going to be really interesting. It's going to really make a difference in some pretty significant ways, I think, in class design, class choice, weapon choice. Like, it's going to be really interesting how they apply these designations across the board, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And then, on the broader front of things, Teom said that they are working on techniques for other classes. This is the part that I think everybody really likes, is that they've got like kits, they've got these kits all plotted out all the way to level 50 for for the other classes. And although they've been emphasizing, balancing them, the classes through to level 10, they're now moving on and starting to implement through to 20 and get that done. And then moving through it, like I said, they've got it planned out through to 50, which is pretty cool to hear. The other part of this that they talked about was how they have the tools that are allowing the creation of these new abilities basically very fast. Of course, that doesn't include like the animations or anything like that, just a functional level. But, their tools are such that allows for that. And that's similar to what we've heard. We've heard this before in terms of class design, that the tools allow for this very quick class design. But I think what we've seen evidence of since they've said that is that, you can put something down on paper pretty quick and you can sort of like functionally put it into the game fairly quickly. But then the actual gameplay design takes time, takes a lot of, experimentation with. And this gameplay stream, one of the things that I think came across to me was, this is what it looks like when they're testing these things, when they're trying to get a feel for them. So I thought that was pretty cool. But what do you think?
That's a really good thing to point out, is they can put these in very quickly. And I think, as Teo put it, like they can, get an ability in, they might not have animations or VFX, but they can get like the effect. And they can immediately start play testing that, because internal QA doesn't need animations or VFX, right? They just need the ability to do a thing. And I think that's also going to cause them to be able to do some really fast iteration, which is extremely important. That, again, since the refactor, this is why this is important. So they don't have to consult a programmer when they need to change a number somewhere, or put in a new ability or anything like that, right? And it's going to be so good in the long run, especially through the bigger testing phases, as they have to adapt and tweak and probably get more people on staff to do that kind of stuff. Make sure they can do it easily. But the biggest takeaway from this part that I think was just super important is that I think a lot of the community was worried right? That they were just working on the monk. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a very
Yeah,
real thing, because that's all we heard about. That's all we saw. And he's just like, no, just so you know, just because we're showing the monk, that's just because they have, animations and, they're easier to show.
Yeah, it's showable right now.
But like, yeah, we've got them all, more or less like set up to 50.
Mm-hmm.
They are focusing on 1 to 10, and well, now 1 to 20, I think he indicated, for the classes that are currently in, because
Mm-hmm.
that gives them a test bed, right? But the actual building, I think they're making it clear that that's not, like, the work we're seeing isn't the only work. And I know I've come against this idea a lot, but in the sense of classes, I think it's totally valid. And he just confirms that, yep, we've been working on all the classes, especially the ones that are currently in, because they're a test bed, but that doesn't mean we're not like building out the rest of the kits and stuff. So it's great confirmation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. People were, kind of grumbling about seeing another monk stream, but again, it's not, you have to look past, what you're seeing in terms of the monk and look at the concepts that are being
Yes.
shown and what they're actually showing you. Just take, and same thing with some of the graphics. I mean, I've seen some comments, again, people pointing at the combat with the deer and saying, this is how many years of development. It's like, but look past that. Look at what you're actually seeing. Don't look at the graphics. So look at the animation, look at the
Listen to
technique
what they're
that's being
talking about.
described,
Yeah, like,
listen to the mechanic that they're talking about, because you have to really understand that what's being shown to you is not necessarily what you're seeing on the screen. It's a design element, right? So, and that actually goes right into what I wanted to say next about readiness, right? Because we haven't really seen readiness demonstrated all that much yet, and now we did. And what readiness is, and how it, feeds technique usage, how it functions. I think we got some really good information. We learned that it basically generates at a very measured pace, and that's actually outside of player control. So, at least in comparison to the class resource, I think was an important takeaway here, because Tehom described the class resource. So whether whatever class you're playing, whether that's your essence as a dire lord or your vision as a shaman, that's much more reliable, and it's also much more controllable by you, the player. So in the video, we saw Minus using, to give an example of this, we saw him using Wandering Fist, a monk ability that's like a quick low damage monk strike, and it actually guarantees the monk's going to evade the next attack. And that uses the class resource of chi rather than readiness. And so, like we've discussed before, you can control your chi flow. They've done several videos about this, about opening the chakra gates, about how you determine that through your actions as a monk or your inactions. And Minus talked about using it strategically in this case to avoid a bleed attack, right? And then Tehom sort of commented on top of that, saying, it not only does it avoid damage, it mitigates downtime between fights. So that's basically what people are looking for. So, I didn't notice it, but it might have just been my distracted attention. What I was looking for was, how is the readiness being generated? And they've talked in the past, we've had this discussion that it's, from your melee attacks, right? It's from when you use is it your auto attacks? What is it being done that's generating your readiness? And maybe I was just distracted, but I didn't really see that. Did you get a good look at that, Des?
So I've already mentioned this, but like, I have to go through the videos even more than I have, because each time I go through the video, I have to pick out different things. And that's not something that I've specifically focused on yet. But
Right.
in the past, I believe it's been said that it's generated from, hits and the mob hitting you. And obviously the monk doesn't really want the mob hitting them. So in essence, choosing to avoid attacks is actually lowering your gain of readiness. So again, another strategic element, right? But one thing that was mentioned was Tehom said that one way to control your readiness gain is by increasing your hit rating, which, to make yourself able to hit the mobs easier and generate more readiness that way. And actually, just off the top of my head, I was realizing that it's probably harder to hit things that are higher level than you, which is an innate, difficulty increaser for higher level mobs. So if you're fighting higher level things, you're actually going to have to count on your readiness being less regenerative, which is I just thought of that, but like again, another layer
No,
of things.
that's exactly right. I mean, that's how we need to figure this out, because it's through like this sort of breaking down of it that we're going to figure it out. So, I'm sort of, coming to these realizations as the same time as you are here about talking about this, because I think it's pretty cool, like and I think again, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you got to understand that there's more going on here than what you're just seeing, right? So,
Yeah, well, if
little
you
details are
touched
very
on
important.
Minus's like kind of deep dive, into when he was like
Yeah.
talking about his experience with the monk, right? And I mean, Tejon was just giddy, because as a designer, I'm sure this just makes his day, right? But
Yeah.
it just really did demonstrate you have to really think about what you're doing, and you really have to pay attention, and not to mention know what you're fighting to, because one of like with the bleed, he was trying to time that kind of, his whole combat strategy to avoid that and take advantage of it. And as Teo said, like you could probably like button mash and come out alive, maybe, but you're almost certainly you're gonna see more risk. You're probably gonna take that bleed, and it's gonna suck. But now you're having to think about, you have way more downtime because you just took a bunch of unnecessary hits, spended a bunch of resources that you didn't need to. And you're probably not going to be able to fight as difficult of enemies because you aren't really strategizing. And
Yeah.
Minus's whole explanation just kind of encapsulates that happening.
What it's all about. Yeah, what it's all about. Yeah, right, exactly. And I like what Tehom said. The balance, the larger goal here is to slow down, and balance the actions per minute approach, but still give players things to do. And the example of fighting games, right? You can mash buttons all day, and you'll win the occasional fight. But players who understand the cadence, you're going to win more reliably. You're going to be able to take on better things, get better loot. If you can't figure this system out, if you don't sink your teeth into it, you're not going to get out of it as much as you possibly could. And it gets more and more relevant at higher levels, they said. And honestly, that should not surprise anyone because this is the 1 to 10 experience, and it's so take this and now layer it until you get to level 50 or whatever max level ends up being, right? So
Mhm.
I really like the idea here, and we got a bit more of an idea where VR is taking this system. Like what they want it to feel like. Overall, I don't feel like my opinion has changed very much. I do think it's a smart approach. Now, I'll voice a concern that I have, and it creates a lot of testing needs. Obviously, yeah, right. Like it takes
Yeah, yeah,
to be able to get these class skills, these weapon techniques balanced. Get these things. Not balanced isn't even the right word. Just not broken,
yeah.
right?
Just not
Like
broken. I like that.
not broken. And they're like, I don't need balance. I just need it not to be broken. That takes a lot of work. So I would just probably keep my finger on the concerned button maybe a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, though, I kind of feel like it just emphasizes the importance of testing with a large amount of people, and how like
Yeah.
helpful that feedback is going to be from players that are inevitably going to break these more than an internal QA could be, which I'm sure this would be a huge deal for if it was just a sole like internal QA of a few people trying to go through all of this and make sure that the interplay between everything is fine. But if you scale that up to thousands of players that are happy to break things for you, like
Yeah.
hopefully everyone's giving feedback too. But even so, there's going to be enough people where they're going to know where the pitfalls are. And, I'm never expecting everything to be perfect equilibrium. In fact,
Yeah.
we're hoping that that doesn't happen,
No.
right?
Yeah, that's why I said not balanced, because I don't want it to be balanced. I just, I just don't want it to be completely out of whack, right? And broken
Right.
beyond all repair, right? So yeah, it takes a lot of testing, and when we get back to testing, we got to put our backs into
Oh,
it,
yeah.
and everybody who's involved in that needs to really get the work done. So So yeah, there's a lot going on here with the techniques and readiness and class skills, but I know that there's a lot in this stream that you wanted to talk about too, and you picked up on. So let me throw it to you and see which things you really wanted to dig into.
Oh, here we go. All right.
Put on the digging claws, ready to go.
Yeah. Well, first thing that I feel is so important to touch on, and we gave it a little touch on the shoulder, but we got to talk about this downtime, and how blatant they just came out and said, "Yep, we definitely increased downtime." Like, I love how bold they are with it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the thing. It's vision and being bold and understanding what they're going for. So they just like, that's what we need. We're going to do.
Yep, and yeah, they said, it's extremely vital to Pantheon's design on a number of fronts, and we're really seeing that. And what I love is this shift, or maybe not a shift, but they're putting the spotlight on a part of gameplay that people probably haven't had to think about for like 20 years. I mean, unless they're still playing some older games. And
which they are,
which a lot of them are. Yeah. But, you're having to think about not just what happens in combat, but you're having to think about how to mitigate downtime. And I think that brings in this whole new element, to what people might expect from a quote unquote combat system, to where your decisions have like a knock-on effect, that people don't really have to think about with a modern game. I'm wondering if that's going to be received well, or if people will understand it,
I think it causes people to have to talk to each other, like, I think it causes people to have to say like, okay, I'm going to sit down, you keep going, like, I need to med, like we actually saw that on stream. We saw
the text
communication, the text between Minus and Teom talking to each other. And there's no way that wasn't done on purpose, obviously, right?
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
I think that was basically done to demonstrate how you navigate this downtime situation, or how you navigate, regen situations.
Yeah, like I think at one point, Teom was like, all right, I can go, but like, I'm not going to be able to mez it, if you get an ad.
Yeah.
Which is really, but they're trying to keep as much uptime as they can, but still balance the other thing. And so resource management is huge. And so they gave a lot of info on that, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to watch the stream, but, let's drill this in, because first off, investment was the big word, that Teom gave. And so when it comes to resting, they've changed up a lot of things here, which is why I want to touch on this. So yeah, you sit down and you rest, but it's more than that, because this is Pantheon. And and so now you actually get this additive amount of regen when you're resting. And he did point out that you can do this in combat, but you start out with a very slow amount of regen, and then the longer you rest, the example they gave was like every like 10 seconds, but I'm sure that's liable to change. Then you get some extra regen and some extra regen and all this stuff. So the really neat thing about this one little change is that it's going to remove, we've seen this in streams. Hopefully I'm not out of bounds here, but where you're not just like seeing people, okay, you cast a spell, then you sit down. And you cast a spell and then you sit down. Because there's a delay before it gets started, right? And so you're not going to just want to be sitting in combat and then casting a spell. That's out the window. But what I really believe is that what this is going to do, because you have to manage your resources, we have to mitigate downtime. And so it's going to make the intensity, and I don't just mean like fast pace, but I mean intensity as in like decision making, your weight of what you do is going to be so much more intense during the uptime. As you're kind of like making these decisions, right? And then your downtime is going to be probably very welcomed,
Well, and you're gonna, it's just more contiguous, right? Like you're doing it more in larger chunks. So you're up and you're active and you're spending your resources and you're executing the combinations that we talked about a minute ago, and you're really thinking and strategizing, and then you're down, and you're better off doing it that way, being completely out of resources for a longer regen time. Now, the trade-off and the consideration you have to make is, does my current group makeup allow me to do that? Or am I with people who also understand that, or do I need to adjust how I'm doing this? Because although that's the optimal way to do it, maybe you're in a situation where you can't. Maybe you have a duo, and it's you and another, not really a strong tank, or maybe not a strong something. Whatever happens to dictate what your needs for your class are in that situation, you might not be able to do it. So I think it really makes things, more weight to your decisions, along with how it's affecting the actual combat.
Yeah, you bring up another great kind of product of this, which is this is going to totally change depending on what group you're in. Like, how well people know each other and what the classes do, etc. They did say that, they're still going to put in some options to mitigate downtime, like buffs and items. But, this is a core thing. So you're going to want to expect downtime to some degree. And if you're a tank that is just like, my thing is I just chain pull and that's just how it goes, I'm sorry, you're going to have to know when that's okay. Right. It's going to change so much about what your group makeup means.
That's where I worry, right? Because I worry when you get people like that who don't know how to do it any other way, and they don't want to change how they're used to doing something, right? And you try to explain to them, say, look, here's how the mechanic works. I get more mana back the longer I'm sitting down, and at a greater rate the longer I'm sitting. And they're like, look, I'm just a speed puller. This is how it is. I do this in WoW. I did this in Final Fantasy. You don't understand. It's not going to work like that.
Yeah, and it's going to be very evident, I think, that it doesn't work like that. Just going off the gameplay that we saw, I think there's a lot that we could actually pull from, and I'd love to go further, but we do have. I think this is going to be a longer episode, regardless. But since we talked about resource management, let's touch on the changes to food, because I think this is another big change. We're no longer using food as instantaneous kind of boost, right?
Right. Yeah. See, this one, I was going to say before you started, like, this one didn't really do much for me, I guess I might say. It seemed, I don't know why, but this didn't seem like that big of a deal to me. Maybe you can explain it to me why this is a bigger deal than I'm understanding.
There are a few nuances that make this great to me, in theory, right? But the one thing is long-term consumable for food, I think, is always the better option, just because it's so annoying, man, to like... grab your, insert edible here every time you need some mana or whatever. It's not fun. It's not.
Yeah, I think the one that they showed during the stream was like 27 minutes on it. I think up in the corner.
Yeah,
you could
the
see
default's
like
30 minutes, I think, is what the baseline is right now. But so there's a few things, and that's the food is a bonus to your normal resting mitigation or resting regeneration. And so it's I think what was the quote? It's complementary to the mechanic of resting and regen, but it's not the foundation of it. So it's not a substitute for resting. It's not like EQ2 where you get some good food and then you just never have downtime.
You're good to go. Yeah. Never need to sit down once you get that food in.
Right. And this is the big twist, man. And this just goes to show, like, they're thinking so far beyond just, hey, we need a food mechanic. Boom, there it is. All right, let's move on.
What I will say, there was a time when food was required, and then they abandoned it. Actually, because it was like EverQuest. It was like if you didn't have food, you were actually punished for not having food and drink in your inventory.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
This was a while ago, but then they let it go. But now it's not that punishment system anymore. Now it's the active reward system that they're going for with this.
But it's actually even deeper than that, because and this is one reason why I love when Tehom speaks on these things, is I know he's thinking about what the other people are thinking about, like the audience. Because when we think, I just have to like always have food going. Okay, whatever. No, because he specifically noted that not all food even gives the regen benefit. There's plenty of food that is other benefits. So you're going to have to decide, do I want the regen benefit for out of combat stuff? Do I want, I don't know, maybe a stat boost? Oh man, it gets so much more deep than it was expected to be, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it just, to me, it feels like just a bonus. You choose your bonus. Like, what do you want? I don't know. I it's okay. It's okay. I'm not up. I think it's good for crafting. I think it's good for the crafter situation and for like consumables and sort of plays into all that. But I think everybody's gonna probably have one really good food that they keep on their in their inventory, and that's what they're just gonna have it on at all times. I don't know, but I'm open to the idea of it being a more interesting system than this. But it kind of, to me, it feels like a something we've seen in quite a few games before. It doesn't really seem that novel to me, but
I
I
wouldn't
stand to be
say it's
corrected.
completely novel, but I do think, the other phrase that's used is player agency. And I do think some players will prefer to have the regen benefit and some players will prefer to have the other benefits. And then it's going to depend on your
Yeah,
class. It's going to depend on your gear setup. It's going to depend on what you're doing. Are you trying to chain pull, or are you trying to, just have the maximum stats for this one fight? And I
yeah,
think that is going to prevent people from having just one food,
yeah,
at
yeah.
least.
You could totally be right.
Uh,
I can agree with that.
then since we're touching on resource regen and stuff, let's real quick dig into sprint, because we've talked about sprint, but they actually showed it. Yay, showing things.
Yay!
Um,
Yay!
so and this touched on endurance. Again, resources that we have to know about. Um,
Hmm.
and I think the quick right off the bat is endurance is for traversal, like almost exclusively. But again, he's thinking about how other people are going to see this. And what's the first thing you think of when you think of running fast? It's kiting.
Yeah, yeah, right. It was immediately framed as a combat tactic and a means of dealing with the environment.
Yes. And again, another choice that you have to make. There are a few takeaways from this. And I mean, there are actually a lot of takeaways from the sprint mechanic, but the main ones I want to kind of touch on is that they're designing it with both out of combat and in combat application in mind. And it is a resource that you'll have to decide whether or not it's a good idea to use. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
this sounds very hard to affect. Like, I think the only way they mentioned to maybe affect your endurance regen was like maybe items and buffs, but mainly like the speed buffs might
Yeah.
help.
Well, to me, it's like what I'm saying earlier. It's like if there's a food that affects endurance, like let's just whatever it is, people are always going to have that on them, so that they can run faster, right? Because I guess it depends on how sprint works. Like, another question that actually came up during the stream was, or I saw it in chat somewhere, was that, is sprint going to take up a space on the action set? Is it going to take up a button? Because how does it actually work? Or is it just like you just hold down shift or something as we do in every other game to run? Um, that's a good question, I thought. And I don't know. I really think that if it you when we saw it, like let's be honest, it was
It was
fast.
really
Like, it
fast,
was
yeah.
fast. I think they need to tune it down a little bit,
But it
maybe.
wasn't very
Um,
long, though. Like, he
right.
wasn't able to do
That's
it
the
very
key
long.
thing, is how long can you sprint that fast
Yeah.
for?
And as
So
you said with the food, I'm going to push back on you a little bit here again, because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
you just mentioned, if there's a endurance regen food, everyone's going to have it. Okay, so if they're going to always have that, they're going to sacrifice the increased, regen for their resting for, their other stuff? Like, would you rather be
Yeah, I
able
don't
to
know.
sprint longer, or would you rather regen your health and mana faster? Would you rather have
Well,
stats?
if I'm a caster, I need to run away a lot. And if I'm a melee, if I'm a tank, I need to get in there and have my mana regenning. I don't know,
But
or my
if
health
if
regen.
you're a caster, do you want to run away better, or do you want to regen your mana better?
Yeah, I guess. I guess. I like it, but again, like, it depends on like how they do it, right? Can you only have one active at a time?
That's the impression I
Is
think was pretty clear.
yeah,
You could
okay,
correct
fair
me,
enough.
but yeah, I don't think you're going to be able to stack a bunch of food buffs, because
Yeah,
that
yeah,
would be silly, and I think they have the forethought to like be like, yeah, that's
for
not
sure.
cool.
Yeah, you're probably right. I
um,
mean, it would be weird if this was like a super poorly thought out system, and all the other ones are very well
right.
thought out, so that wouldn't make any sense. But I really liked the sprinting just overall. I think it looked cool. I thought the animation was really cool. I think being as fast as it looked, um, you know, probably, I don't even know. Like I said, they need to tone it down. I don't even know. I think that's kind of fun to be able to run that fast. But
For a little bit,
I
yeah.
did enjoy
Because
it.
I think
Yeah.
if you're trying to get away from something, it would feel like you're actually getting away and not like, because if it was just like a 10% boost, you're probably don't feel like you're actually
Yeah,
sprinting,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah,
Right.
something that can be tuned as well. But the really interesting thing that affects everyone from this, I think, was they specifically started talking about like the let's just say it, Spirit of the Wolf, or like the song, the Bard song. Uh,
Yeah, Velo's something.
yeah, it's just
Can't remember the name of it.
how they may want to play with how that affects sprint rather than just general movement speed. And I think that's going to be something people are going to have some strong feedback on because, again,
For
a
sure.
lot of people are really used to set it and forget it, like, oh, I get my 30-minute SAO. I'm just
Hmm.
faster for 30 minutes. Well, it's like, okay, what if SAO, instead of giving you just flat movement speed, allowed you to regen endurance more, or allowed you to
Yep.
sprint faster when you were sprinting. Like, it adds more variability that I think a lot of people aren't necessarily expecting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you, I'm going to be running in the wrong direction quite often. So maybe going fast isn't what I want. Maybe it's going to just help me get lost much quicker. I don't know. We'll see.
yep. Actually, you mentioned the animation, so maybe we could quickly, what did you
Yeah.
think of the animations, man?
I love them. I love them. I think that the monk combat animations were excellent. I went back and looked at it again today because I couldn't remember exactly sort of what it was about it that I liked. But there's like multiple things going on in one of them where it's like they spin the staff, they sort of jut it into the ground and then do their attack. It's really, they're very cool. They're very unique and different, and I really enjoyed them. And I I think they look great. I can't say more than that. I don't know what else to say, but what do you think?
I really, someone in chat actually pointed this out, was that they actually match a lot more of a quarterstaff technique, like a real life quarterstaff technique, than most games go
Hmm.
for. And I have to say, I really appreciate that. That he's actually using the staff generally how you would actually use a staff. It sounds
Yeah,
silly,
yeah,
but yeah, a lot of games get that wrong. So I gotta
yeah.
give props for that. I feel like some of the transitions were still a little stiff, um,
Hmm.
which I
I
think
didn't
they
notice
might
that.
be still working on. It almost makes things feel a little bit sped up, to me, where you do
Hmm.
your attack and the animation's cool, but then you just like snap back to your auto attack.
Yeah.
And if they could figure that out, I'll be super happy. I think a lot of people were really critical of the animations, maybe more than they
I
should have
don't
been.
understand that.
I think it's just because
Yeah.
a lot of games do mocap, and they
Yeah.
have these really natural, weighty animations. But I actually am
I don't
okay
know.
with the not perfectly realistic animation style of the more handcrafted kind
Yeah,
of a
me
thing.
too.
And I think
Me
in
too.
this kind of game, you don't notice as much too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really need, it just doesn't need to be, pixel perfect, and every action needs to be perfectly, working with the physics and look realistic. It just has to look fun. Like it just has to look decent enough to make me, not when I do the animation as my character, have people make fun of me for it. Like that's all I'm looking for here, right?
I
So
mean, I
I don't
might
know.
be a little bit further on the scale then, just because I
Yeah,
want
I
stuff
think
to
you're more of a
feel.
perfectionist.
I just want stuff to feel impactful, like I want it to feel like I'm hitting something when I hit the key, right?
Yeah.
But overall, the other takeaways for the animation side was that it sounds like they've really honed in their animation pipeline with the new people. So I think we'll be
Yeah.
seeing a lot more activity, and hopefully a little bit more polish maybe. But they're
Yeah.
looking great. I think in general, it says their next steps for that are going to be the idle stances, the auto attacks, casting animations that were mentioned previously as well. So really
Yep.
looking
Yep.
forward to how it all kind of comes together. Because I think my bickers are probably going to be solved once everything is put together, you know?
Yeah, no, and I think I'm not concerned about that at all. I like the way that they do it. They've always looked good to me, and I've never had any real quibbles with the animations. So just keep doing what they're doing and keep developing the other classes along the same lines as what we saw with the monk, and I'd be okay with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, a few other things that I want to take away from the Q&A side. Um, the first one was they kind of talk about like when's the right time to group and what are they kind of like designing for, right? And I think we kind of knew that level 10 was like kind of the general gist.
Yep, that's what we've been told. Yep.
But, you know, as they said, like they're very actually open about this. I realized that they're just kind of like, yeah, monk is a very soloable class. Like as if other classes probably aren't, which is fine, which is fine. But they say that, yeah, that it even starts to taper off that solo, you know, really easy solo ability. You start to feel it the closer you get to level 10. And I think Minus example was just so good here. I think Minus's examples through this whole stream were really great because obviously he's excited to play the game, but they're really poignant. So he pointed out that kind of the difference in the starting experience when he was grouping up versus when he was soloing. And I thought that was just such a good comparison because when he could group, he could obviously face higher level enemies. And I love he even pointed out specifically it enabled him to face these skeletons, which had a chance for, you know, better loot, as in like he said, like cloth armor and weapons, which is really important. You know,
Yeah.
Did you notice Teom actually pointed out that rogues have a hard time starting out because they to be really effective, they need a second weapon?
I did hear that. Yeah, I did hear that. Specifically that. Yeah, for sure.
And so this kind of just innately means that a rogue is probably going to want to group a little sooner just for the sake of access to equipment.
Yeah.
What a concept, right?
Well, you know, the thing is, it's again, it's about class design, right? So, I mean, you know, if you're a solo player, if you really want to just solo as much as possible, you want to play the best class for that, you know, maybe the rogue's not it. Maybe monk is the way to go. And if that's not something you're into, you know, that's kind of it's going to be a difficult thing for you to deal with, I guess, unless you're willing to group up to get what you want, you know, like, and I got a comment on those skeletons as well. They were pretty cool. I know everybody liked them. As soon as I saw them, I'm like, oh man,
yeah,
people are going to love those things.
I really like the glowing effect. And it was a nice little tidbit to show that they have the ability to do some cool effects now. HDRP is, it raises the ceiling, right? You know, it doesn't innately make everything better, but, the glow effect, and it's really hard because it's like, you know, 1080p, it's all kind of processed on YouTube, and so I think in game it's going to look even better by far.
Yeah. Speaking of looking better in game,
I have to call this out.
You were given
Minus.
You were given a.
I have to send a
nice
personal thank you.
You're very excited about this.
Well, I kind of knew this was coming. They alluded to this. I think CR alluded to this, but Minus specifically pointed out, like, you know, someone said something about the mountains and rocks looking low poly, right? And I've bickered about this many times, every time, because I see them and it hurts me, and they're not ready to show it. But they do have some major improvements for rocks and mountains and just terrain, I guess would be the general gist, right? And man, okay, Minus, you really did hype this up. So my like I said on the Plus U, man, my expectations are now higher. So thanks for that. But I am really looking forward to this because I think it's going to change the whole look of the game. Like there's other things I could point out, like the shadows under the trees don't, you know, affect certain parts of the scene and random stuff, but that is going to be such a big overall change. I think it's going to make the game look so much better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to it too. I wouldn't have been excited if Minus didn't seem so excited about it. If they just said, "Oh, if you know the trees and the rocks and the mountains will look better next time you see them," I'd been like, "Okay, whatever." But he seemed very excited about it. So, you know.
Yep. I am that. I don't want to be vain, man, but I think that's going to change a lot of people's opinions on how the game looks in general.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
All right. So I'm gonna throw this to you first. Just do you want to get into a couple more little things?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I still haven't been able to parse through literally every frame of of the video, right? But I did find some really interesting bits. One was right off the bat. Minus was such a joy for this because I think he's thrown us so many bones because he moused over every ability. He moused over, all this. He opened all the windows. Oh man. So really giving us a lot to go on. That's going to take weeks to unpack, I'm sure. But opens the character window, which we've seen before, and this time it has this whole side panel for skills.
Yeah, the skills were really interesting. And a long time ago, we saw a spreadsheet with their deep stats.
Yeah.
They had something along the lines of this where it was, a different form of it. But basically, when you understand, like, look at the skills, like, look at how many there are. I'll put this image in the video so everybody can see it when we're talking about it during the premiere. But like, this is a lot, this is a lot of different areas to, you can potentially increase your character's abilities in all these different skills, and we talked about skill caps last week, right?
And it shows them.
I mean, specifically, but specifically that was about weapons. But again, we're talking about casters, we're talking about support classes and everything like that. So this was pretty cool. And I'm glad he did that. And I'm not surprised because he did that when we played through Fortress Devair, and he did every single little thing. And it was very informative then too. So it's a good thing to do.
Yep. I have to point out a few things. I know this is going long, but so one thing is about the incremental skill updates, because that's really important, right? That while we're a certain level, that we experience some kind of progression, and you already see that now. Like, you're seeing incremental updates in the chat window from combat. Yeah.
Interesting. But I mean, and again, it may not be something you feel right away, but it's at least feeding that piece of your brain that's like, ooh, I'm getting better at this. Ooh, I'm getting better at this, right? Like, we really feed on that kind of stuff.
I think it's obviously going to matter a lot, in the later parts of the game.
Yeah.
But even to start off, just knowing that what you're doing has more effect than just your general level. And then, we have this probably work in progress, like, UI stuff to at least tell you, like, hey, like, you have all of these skills. And I'm sure all those skills aren't even applicable immediately, right? Because this is level 1 monk.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it's showing you that they're there to give you something to look forward to is really important.
Agreed.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, no, and enjoy that.
Let me ruffle some feathers and just say, if you have this up on screen, just look at the bottom of the window and then we'll move on. To the combat summary. Have we ever talked about this on the Rewind before?
No, I don't think so. Because the last time, I'm trying to think if they showed this during our Devair stream. I think they did, because I was catching a lot of flack for the wizard deeps that I wasn't doing. So I do remember this. I have some sort of traumatic memory of this. So, but this is kind of cool. Yeah.
Oh man. Cool. Well, who knows if this is going to be player visible, right? But yeah, I'm sure the chat is going to just chat comments and everything because built-in parse. What? Oh no.
I don't know, man. I don't know if I don't know if this was like something they're gonna actually allow, but yeah, I don't even know what I can say about it, because there may be discussions in other places that are going on that deal with this, but maybe it's just something we can leave here for now.
Exactly.
And circle back on it a later.
Yeah, that was kind of my intent. Is if we're gonna ruffle a few feathers like at the end of the section, like, may as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Here, let me offer you a reprieve from ruffling feathers and bring up the one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that's the class and race matrix. Right? Because we haven't really hit on that yet, and it was definitely something I wanted to touch on. Now, it I don't have a lot to say about it, but I wanted to definitely mention it because I'm just trying to find my notes here. Yeah, so they tweaked it a little bit. It was neat to see some of them making some of these changes that they've talked about in the past. They've said that they were going to do some changes, and I've never been one to like. I wasn't really a big proponent of it. I don't feel like it was needed to be done right now, but it is kind of neat when they explain the lore behind why some of these changes are made, right? So like the Dark Mer Druid can't do Druid because it's antagonistic towards the planet of Terminus and nature, whereas, you know, the one that really stands out, and I think you'll agree with me, is the Halfling Dire Lord. That is some insane class and race design, and the Tale of Arakamel, right? If you we'll read that next after we finish Genesova this week. I'm going to start the Tale of Arakamel because I want you to think about that tale and then put a halfling as a Dire Lord, right? It's such a crazy concept, but it does open up a lot of cool design. And, you know, this was a neat thing for them to show off. It's not really I have a hard time seeing this as like a development update, you know, like they could have basically made this decision anywhere along the lines, you know, so, but it's a fun thing to talk about for sure. So it feeds into the lore, and I would actually have maybe preferred that they did it as like a lore release type of thing where they sort of introduced it via a lore narrative or something like that. Would have been kind of cooler to me. How did you like that part?
You know, I did take away, probably above all, just how fundamental lore is in Pantheon, which I knew, right? But whenever they bring it up as, I mean, Tehom said, you know, it's the foundation of everything that goes into this game, including the gameplay, and them justifying all of the class and race combos by lore and like how the races are was so like inspiring, I guess. And then the little hints about how like halflings have a connection to the Dire immediately makes my brain start trying to connect things, right? I think it's excellent. And I know I happen to watch a bit of the day after watch party from Bazgrim, and I know some people are going to be disappointed about warriors. No more halfling warriors, right? But I like the changes. You know, more additions than subtractions, that's for sure. Obviously, Nathan's happy.
That's true.
Like,
yes, Nathan's a very happy camper. I've seen good feedback about the Scar Rangers too. I mean, people seem to like that.
Very excited about Scar Rangers, right?
Bunch of weirdos out there. You don't know what Rangers are all about. They're not about dominating nature and like, you know, I don't want to get off.
Okay, so I gotta say why this is important and why I'm excited about it. And it's not because it's just a Scar that's a Ranger. It's because they make it clear that a Ranger isn't a Ranger, and that the race actually has a lot to do with the manifestation of the class. Obviously, a Halfling Dire Lord is going to have a different trajectory than a Ogre Dire Lord, right? And that's something that we do not see. I would confidently say we do not see that in modern games. You're the best race that goes with your class, but it doesn't really matter what your race is for your gameplay, right? And this, if you roll a Scar Ranger and then you roll a Halfling Ranger, your experience is going to be very different. In the long term, even, I'll bet.
Yeah, that's true for sure. So, I mean, interesting combinations. I have no problem with it, and I'm glad that they're thinking about these things. So that's pretty cool. Let's wrap up the news though. Let's put a bow on this one. Anything else before we do that though? That you wanted to say?
I mean, just a few things.
I know you probably.
It's just really cool. Like, I mean, if you weren't there live on Twitch, it was just great to see, Ko in chat just being a player, right? And what's crazy about this is I just mentioned Summer Game Fest. He was just like co-hosting this huge show with like 40,000, viewers. And he it was like what, an hour or two later, he's in chat on VR's, 400 person and he's
Yeah,
just a player.
It was pretty cool.
I love it.
It was very cool.
I love it. But overall, I like this stream so much more. I think it was nice and simple. I think it was super effective. I mean, obviously, like I said, the floodgates are opening, right? But it was just, I feel like it was more professional. It didn't seem awkward to me.
For sure.
And I think the feedback I've seen so far is like overwhelmingly positive for this stream. Except for the like random folks that'll just always, nothing is ever
Except
enough,
for
right?
The unofficial Discord.
But like overall, man, the comments are great. The feedback was great, and I think they did an excellent job. I hope this is like if this is what we're seeing like from here on, Pantheon's going to get a lot more interest.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, well that's a pretty good wrap. We're at an hour and we're just hitting up on the Pantheon Plus schedule for the week, but that's okay. Here's a look at our calendar for the week. As always, we've got some interesting stuff going on. Drax streaming EverQuest on Monday for the Norath After Dark stream, which is what they're calling it now. Tuesday, we'll be going back to EverQuest. I'm so sad that I missed the first session of MMOs 101 on Tuesday this week in EverQuest. I was stuck at work and I just could not get out of there on time. And by the time I was home, it was too late. So I was really upset about that. But I'm getting my levels. I'm going to get on for next week. So I'll be there to return to EverQuest after many, 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 many years. Wednesday, Sparrow's got Elder Scrolls Online. She's playing that on her Twitch channel at 9 p.m. Eastern. Thursday, they've got the newsletter coming out, so that'll be fun to review and check out. Friday, we've got Redbeard Flynn putting up a video on YouTube talking about the weather systems in Pantheon and Ashes of Creation. Now, they just released a big update on their game about how weather affects things, and it's actually really interesting. I looked at it a little bit myself, so I'm interested to see this comparison. That's on Redbeard Flynn's YouTube channel. That evening, Friday, the 6:30 in the evening, Sparrow's streaming on P99, doing some P99 stuff with her buds. And that's the calendar for the week. I also want to mention Cringe Pony TV episode 2. Yeah, you're listening to this on Sunday. Episode 2 will have aired the previous night on Saturday night at 11 p.m. Central at midnight Eastern on Nathan Napalm's channel. And if you watched it, you saw me and Drac doing some pretty horrible puppetry and being as cringy as we possibly could, although it's not at the same quality of Nathan, but we try our best. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hey Drac, how's it going?
Theric, we're supposed to have sock puppets. I think you forgot something.
Oh, right. I'll be right back. See, that's better. A sack puppet, right?
Nope, still wrong. Get a sock and draw some eyes on it. This isn't that hard.
Ah, gotcha. 1 second. Okay, hold on. I'll be right back. Now we're talking. So when do we get swords and stuff? I heard there would be adventures.
Kids, let this be a lesson. Let's leave puppetry to the professionals at Cringe Pony TV.
Check out Pantheon Plus for all your non-puppet MMO needs. So definitely check out Cringe Pony TV on Nathan Napalm's channel. And that'll wrap it up for this week's VR News and Notes.
The Pantheon community is full of cool projects, new people, and things that are just worth sharing. What's this over here? Look at that. So let's see what we can find in this week's Community Spotlight. All right, Community Spotlight time. Super quick round, right? So I mentioned earlier I was around for Baz's watch party, at least the first hour or so. He digs in a lot, and I can't wait to watch the recap on YouTube because I missed a good chunk. He was just getting into the gameplay stuff when I had to leave, but you definitely want to go check that out. Obviously there's tons of thought. He's got chat going and stuff. It's a great time to just kind of recap. Maybe they point out something that you missed. And they also play Pantheon Bingo.
The bingo was pretty popular. Did you notice
Yeah.
Ronick referenced it several times during the stream? I was so happy for Bazgrim when they were doing that, because I was like, hey, he's referencing the thing that Baz created, this Pantheon bingo card, and Ronick seemed really
Oh,
into
yeah.
it. So I actually want to go watch the watch party from Baz's channel as well, because I want to see firstly his commentary on it, because he's got some really good insights and probably lots of smart commentary on it, but also to see who won the bingo contest.
I was at like 3 out of 5 when I left the stream, because I started to do it
Nice.
on the stream night, but I there's no way I could split my attention that many ways. But I couldn't complete mine. So maybe other people had better luck, but yeah. And then we've got, may as well shout out Nathan twice here, because you mentioned
Yeah.
Cringe Pony TV, but he's come out with Pantheon MMO race and class changes and sprint and new gameplay. He's covering as much as he can, I'm sure, and it's going to get your blood pumping. It's going to get you excited. It's going to get you hyped. And it's it's Nathan.
If you watch it, he's doing it a little different style, which I really liked, actually. He does it where it's like you can see him talking like he actually has the camera on himself.
Oh,
Usually
yeah.
he just does voiceover work with gameplay going on in the background. And I just wanted to comment on it because I think I really like the new way he's filming it now. I think it looks pretty cool. So if you don't know, Nathan NAPALM, does a good job.
I actually agree with that. I really like it too. So keep it up, man. You keep us young.
So fun.
But since this is a speed round, that's going to be it for this week's community spotlight, and we'll be back with a community discussion another time.
Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. Okay, so lore time. Now we're going to talk about the next mission of Janisova, and the last part of the tale. As we learned today, his methods and motives tend to be as enigmatic as he may be. What does it mean to be a dark traitor? We have that conjures images of certain, moral tendencies, but when the opportunity arises for Janisova to take a contract, is he beholden to do so? In this tale, we're actually left wondering whether it's his morality that decides, or maybe even a higher bidder, because the story doesn't really tell us, but we have to sort of figure out from what we hear. So I really like this part of the tale, and I hope you enjoy the words of Jan Gerhardt, Pantheon's lead writer, as we conclude the story of Janisova for this week's Lore You Know. There is another tale that might shed light on Sova's silhouette, a more recent chapter from his book on subverting the subverted. It began with a contract on a daughter of a Tyrusan noble family of Thronefast. On the surface, the term seemed self-evident. The girl was to be kidnapped and subsequently held for ransom. This was pretense of the darkest sort. The traitor who took the contract would learn that the true purpose of the mission was to abduct the girl and slay her, leaving the crime indisputably at the feet of the fledgling human government of Paragos, a colony to the east of Kingsreach. Dark traitors of elite stature are sought through a number of ways, and the signature of a mission was in the habit of using a creature known as an echo, a sort of limited specter that can drift between the material and immaterial worlds. Whether or not he was contacted by an echo, Sova did not take the contract. Instead, it was claimed by the Daywalker. This mountain of an assassin wears pure white wrappings over all of his body, and is said to move so swiftly that neither dust nor blood can stick to those garments. His eyes, hands, and feet are all that are left uncovered, and he uses no weapon or tool in his craft. Yet his name comes not from the color of his clothing, but the time at which he strikes, broad daylight, on every occasion. The young Tyrusa lady relaxed with her family beneath an opulent tent on their private isle in the Bethrael Sea. Their party was guarded by no less than a dozen men-at-arms, with additional scouts spread throughout the shore and forest. When Syros was highest in the sky, they sounded an alarm. A large beast was approaching their camp. In truth, it was the Daywalker. His pace deliberately slow, his frame as solid as stone,
inviting the Tyrus family guards to intersect with him far from the main party. The sand muffled his steps, but each foot sunk clumsily into the sand and surf, making a trail behind him. It seemed his heralded speed would be neutralized in this pristine and carefully chosen environment. The dry grains of sand exploded around the soldiers' boots as they hurled themselves towards it, with a few left back to herd the family off to the safety of the rowboats further down the shore. A wizard stood behind the men as they charged, her sweaty hands starting to crackle with energy in the same fractured beat of her heart. At this juncture, the daywalker set his steps upon the sand, as if they were solid as stone. Then he began to run. It is said there is a moment when the turn arrives, a flash when the lies of the night die in the face of the light. Perhaps it comes in a whisper, a glint of sudden steel, or the first trickle of blood. In this moment on that tiny isle, turn was quiet for some and loud for others. The daywalker leaped over the men-at-arms, leaving their swords and pikes as impotent as their shouts. He only picked up speed as he landed, then drove his foot so hard into the wizard's chest, she flew backwards into the water, dead. His speed was that of a dragon, diving down in attack, while his body remained calm as a dove. He finally slowed as he approached the last of the guards, snapping arms and neck with the routine movements of a chef, preparing crabs for feast. Yet, something slowed his spirit, for as he leapt once more through the air and came crashing down on the painted wooden dinghy, the daywalker saw no sign of the girl, the target. Her parents and siblings were struggling in the water, but they were not his concern. He left the boat, a mass of shattered timber and bones, then dismissively marched toward the waves and walked directly into the sea. Sova was not seen at the attack. He was not mentioned by any of the survivors, nor by the noble Lord Tyrusa, who was himself grievously injured in the fray. When the battle passed, 5 men-at-arms lay dead on the sand, their wounds creating pools of red crystal until the tide swept it all away. The wizard was pulled lifeless from the sea. The lord and his lady survived, and the daywalker was gone. Yet, what of their daughter, the one for whom this calamity had been launched? She was gone, not in the arms of the daywalker, not under the protection of a guard. That afternoon, she was found sleeping in her bed in Thronefast, resting off a fever that had come suddenly upon her. She had told no one, and none could say, least of all the girl herself, if she had ever left the bed that morning. Yet, when she awoke from a dream-filled sleep, the girl noticed a mottled gray feather in the palm of her hand. Nothing more.
And that is the lore you know. And that sound means it's the end of another episode and the beginning of another week closer to the launch of Pantheon.
Rise of the Fallen.
Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. And hopefully we're, every week, but it just, these discussions and all these things we do, it makes the journey go by in a much better way. And Desrin, it's a pleasure to walk this path with you.
It's so fun. Thanks for letting us go a little bit long on that segment, because it's a blast. Just in case you guys don't know, the external processing is good for us too, right? 100%
external processing. I really if I didn't do this, I don't think I could do, it sort of builds on itself. All this content builds on itself. I couldn't do Pantheon Plus U. And I want to mention before we end the show too, on Pantheon Plus U, I want to thank Tehom again for jumping into the green room and joining. I can't believe I didn't mention this during the show, but he jumped into the green room and was on the show with us. And we actually got to talk to him, me and Drac and Nathan. It was amazing. And it was just this is VR. This is what they do. I never expected to see them jump in the green room like that. And what a cool night. I just sort of fell asleep last night thinking, man, that's awesome. So hearty thanks to everyone at VR for supporting us here at Pantheon Plus, and really appreciate that. And we will continue to make content until until Pantheon is 20 years old.
Forever.
Until forever. That sounds about right. So a hearty thank you to our lovely friends in the community, everybody that supports the Rewind and everything we do at Pantheon Plus. So with that, I'll say join us again next week, and cheers.
See you forever, guys.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at PantheonTheric on Twitter, and Desrin at DesrinDoes also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.